Yes! That's awesome! What?
So this is the first in the video series I'm calling the composite art process, where I'm going to have multiple case studies, just showing you various tips and techniques for how to composite images. But more importantly, my approach to globally thinking about how to integrate two different images or multiple different images into the same scene and making it look realistic. Local and global lighting control, color matching, perspective, all of those kind of things. So in this case study, I'm going to show you how to take the image of this guy and I'm going to put him in these three scenes: here, here, and here. So the way to get started with composites is making sure you understand the best way to get two images or more together in Photoshop. As with anything in Photoshop, you can do anything 100 different ways. But I would suggest that there are ways that are really slow and clog up your memory, and there are ways that are crazy fast and they don't use up any of your memory, like, more production. So I'm going to show you 4 ways, kind of rated from slowest to fastest and best. You can use whatever way you want. So first, let me show you the slowest way that I see a lot of my students doing. They'll find an image in Bridge, double click it so it launches in Photoshop and loads. Go back to Bridge, click on another image by double clicking so it auto loads. And then it's like the old technique: Command A to select all, Command C. And again, this is even knowing some keyboard shortcuts, because you could go to the menu items every time. And then go back, click on the tab where you want it, and Command V it. Okay, it didn't quite fit in the screen, so now I have to Command T it to get the free transform. So I can either make this bigger or I can stretch it up, resize it, stretch it up. Whatever I need to do, hit enter, unlock that background, pull the guy on top. Okay, now I can mask him out to show, and I'll just do a very quick object selection. It's not going to be great, but it'll be okay for this super quick demo. Get it figured out, and I'd add a layer mask so I can quickly get there. But you saw how many clicks it took just to get to that point. So let me show you another way that's, I would say, is the next step up. So let's say the student has done the same thing where they've opened each individual image. So here's the next best way. Click on the layer, drag it over to the tab that you want it, and then pull it back down. That's pretty reasonable way, right? I still have to click over here to unlock. I still have to pull this to the top, right? But that's still good. I didn't waste any of my RAM. Photoshop remembers the last 20 things you did. So if you're copying 50 meg files and pasting them into other documents, you do that 10 times, that's half a gig of your RAM just being wasted in the background. You see what I mean? So if over the course of a couple of hours, you do that 20 times, well, all of a sudden you've used a whole gig of your RAM doing nothing but copying and pasting. So this dragging method is great because it doesn't occupy your RAM at all. Now let me show you another way. Let's say I have one image open already. So I'll go back to Bridge and just slide your bridge over and just click and drag it into the Photoshop window and release. It auto fits to the screen as a smart object, allowing me already to have the free transform handles. So I don't have to hit Command or Control T so that I can do this. See how, that was quicker. So that's the third way. Now I'm going to close all of this. I'm going to show you the quickest way, my favorite way. This works best if you already know what images you want to start the composite with. So I'll command click one image, and I'll command click this image, and then I'll go up to the top toolbar for Adobe Bridge, click on Tools. I'll come down to Photoshop, and I'll go Load Files into Photoshop Layers. And this is where the magic happens. I click it. It does all that stuff that we did automatically for me. Notice I have no background layer to unlock. It's fit all the images together in the same scene, so I don't have to do any Command or Control T just to get it to fit. So it did all that for us, and it's not wasted any of our RAM. So that's how I would approach getting your images to start for compositing. So now that I have the two images together, I'm going to turn this eyeball off, and I need to mask the guy. I'm going to try the object selection tool right here. And typically, all you do is you just select it. You draw a selection around the bulk of the image you want it to figure out. It's going to try to do its best. These are some complicated areas right in here. So I'll hold down the Command and Space bar just to zoom in by dragging. For here, I would probably switch back over to the Quick Selection tool, hold down the Alt or Option key and say, I don't want that part. And see, it's going to have trouble, right? it's going to have trouble because of the darkness of the gray matches the darkness of the gray here. So I'll hold down the shift key just to add to the selection, just to try and give Photoshop a hand. Remember, it's a learning AI. So the more you do it on the same image, the more to try to figure stuff out. And if it's having too much of a trouble, then just go a little old school. Go to the Polygonal Lasso tool right here. And what I'm going to do is, remember, I want to deselect this space. So I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key to remove from the active selection. I'm going to click and drag. And if you make short movements with the Polygonal Lasso tool, you can go around curves pretty nicely. Double click. Okay, I've got rid of all of that.
6.5 hours later.
All right. So once I've done as good as I can manually, I'll hit Command or Control 0 to fit in screen. I'll choose the selected mask, and I'm going to choose, what is it doing? It's showing me on onion skin. I think for this one, I'm going to do this overlay. And again, I found this right over here. If you hit the disclosure triangle for the view, and a really good way is to actually view it on the layer. If I had the layer activated beneath it, but I don't, I have it turned off currently. What I like to do is come over to the second tool. It's the Refine Edge Brush tool. And this is where the magic happens. You tell Photoshop by clicking Smart Radius and pulling it up a pixel or two, make your brush bigger or smaller with the right bracket key. That's the keys by the letter P. And I'm just going to pass over like the edge that had fuzzies. Remember, there was some fuzzy hair over here. There was some fuzzy hair over here. And you can see I'm getting into the head a little bit. Command space bar to zoom in. So if that happens, just hold down the Alt or Option key and tell Photoshop, no, don't go so far into his hair. And again, this is complicated because it's a black and white image. It has trouble with black and white images a lot.
6.5 hours later.
And before I go around this edge, let me smooth it a touch. Let me feather it a touch. I'm going to call that good enough for work. Now, what I like to do is toggle the output settings, and I like to choose new layer with layer mask. That way it's going to hide the original by turning the eyeball off. Command or Control 0 to fit in screen. And now I have the guy on his own layer. If I hit the move tool, I can move him wherever I want in my image. I'll turn back on this layer, grab it and pull it below and see what I think. So because it's a background image, I don't care if I overstretch it. I'm not worried about over pixelizing. So I hit Command or Control minus just to make my image smaller so that when I hit Command or Control T and hold the Alt or Option key so it centers when I drag up, hold Alt or Option just to figure out the scale of what I think is exciting in the background. So now let me convert this background to black and white. I'll just add a black and white adjustment layer. And actually, they both have pretty high contrast lighting. I would say that he's got a little bit higher of a contrast. So let's go ahead and tweak that as well. Go up to add a levels adjustment layer. And to increase the contrast, you just drag in the black and the white sliders. Okay, it seems like we're starting to match some of the lighting in this. And I think what I would like to do is blur the background a bit. It's a little visually distracting because they're both so sharp. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate that layer down here. I'm going to go to filter, blur. So the lens blur is a much more sophisticated algorithm. It doesn't look fake like sometimes the Gaussian blur can. So, and you have all these adjustments that you can make to affect the quality of the blur. In general, you have faster and more accurate. Click OK.
6.5 hours later.
So see how it gave it a nice subtle blur? And if I blurred it too much, if the shallow depth of field doesn't quite fit, what you have to do is lower the opacity just to minimize it a touch. So all of a sudden I've went from, f5.6 to, f8, something like that. Of course, it's all relative to how close the lens is to the subject and how long the focal length is, but we won't get into that nitpicky stuff right now. Okay, so I like this image already. Let's Command or Control 0 to make sure I'm in screen. I am. I hit Command or Control minus just to see. Yeah, I like where this is going. I think what I would like to do is add a vignette. So I would add a blank layer, Shift Delete, fill it with black, click multiply, add a layer mask, B for the brush tool, white is my foreground, right bracket key holding it down so to just zoom up really big, really fast. Okay, I know. I go a little fast, and it's not to impress upon you what I know. It's just that I want to kind of outline how once you learn these keyboard shortcuts, how much it speeds up your real world productivity time. So things that would normally take you an hour and sometimes it'd be frustrating, you can literally knock out in like 5 or 10 minutes, allowing you even more time to spend on your creative endeavors in Photoshop. Now, I don't mind going a little fast in some parts of these videos, only because I know I'm serving people that are just learning Photoshop, who can pause the video and rewind the video and rewatch the video to people that are very advanced and have spent a few years in Photoshop and they're just trying to see how someone else works, because we all can learn from each other. So again, let's replay that a little bit.
Yes!
Let's Command or Control 0 to make sure I'm in screen. I am. Command or Control minus just to see. Yeah, I like where this is going. I think what I would like to do is add a vignette. So I would add a blank layer, Shift Delete, fill it with black, click Multiply, add a layer mask, B for the brush tool. White is my foreground. Right bracket key, holding it down so to just zoom up really big, really fast. So I can paint on the mask, but I need to be painting with black. So hit X because I'm painting on a white mask. There we go. Now let's check out my brush. My hardness is 50%. I really wanted 0 hardness for that. So I hit Command or Control Z and do it again. And now I'm going to lower the opacity of that because I just want to subtly bring down those corners. That way he sticks out. Now, if I want to use the same mask above, I can hold down the Alt or Option key and pull it above the guy. Notice my opacity was at 50. I'm going to hit 0 for 100% because I want to have him crystal clear, right? I don't want him hit in the center by that at all. And then I can come back down here and maybe type 8 for 80%. So I can just brighten up that background just a tiny bit. And you can see the mask. Hold down the Alt or Option key and click, and that'll show you the mask. Click again. So now let's add a texture. It's a tiny texture, but that's okay. It's a texture. I'm not worried about pixelization with a texture because we're going to use the blend mode to blend it anyway. I drug it over, came in as a smart object ready to be free transformed. I stretched it. I'm going to hit enter. There's my texture, which in and of itself makes an interesting image. But now I just want to use a blend mode. And usually multiply darkens, screen lightens, and overlay or soft light gets rid of gray and keeps the blacks and the whites, and is usually good for, kind of this grungy kind of look. So I'm going to choose the soft light, and notice where I've applied it. I've applied the texture only to the background, but I would like to have a little bit of the texture on the guy. So I hold down the Alt or Option key, which will duplicate while I drag and put it in front of the guy. Now notice what's happened. When I had it underneath the black and white adjustment layer. So it was automatically making it a black and white texture. But up here, I didn't keep that black and white. So I do like that sepia tint, that warm tint that's happening with the actual image. If you hold down the Alt or Option key and click on the eyeball, it turns off all other images. So you can look at exactly that one layer only. And then Alt or Option, click back on the eyeball. I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer just so that texture's thoroughly black and white. Come back down to the texture over top of the guy, add a layer mask, left bracket key to make my brush smaller. Check my foreground, make sure it's black because I am painting over here on a white mask. And I'm going to tap 6 for 60% up in the opacity because I don't want to take it all off of them. But I do want to take some of that texture off. 8 for 80% because now I have a double texture on the background, but I like that it's separated from the other texture I put in. And then I can hit X, tap 4 for 40% if I want to bring back in a little bit of the texture just to make sure that it feels integrated in the scene. So now that I've done all of this work, let's clean up our layers panel. So here's the black and white and the texture. I'm just going to click on those, hit Command or Control G. Now texture, this is the guy. So I'm going to leave all of that together, hit Command or Control G, guy. All of this is for the texture, right? So, and I want to keep all of this together separate from the image down here. So I'll shift click the top and the bottom, Command or Control G, and then back. Texture. Now here's the really powerful part. I can now just turn off those images, right? Go back to bridge and drag in this image. It's going to automatically fit. Now it will load the image, Command minus. It will load the image above the layer that I had previously selected. So just be mindful of that if you don't have to drag it. And here I want this arch above his head. But that means I'm going to have to stretch the image. So if I hold down the Shift key while I'm pre-transforming, I can actually skew the aspect ratio, which typically you don't want to do unless there's a purpose. And for me, there's a purpose here. I'll hit enter, and I'll actually drag it below that texture. So now I have an auto-applied black and white adjustment, an auto-applied texture, because I've already done all this work. Command and Control 0. So there's that image.
Yes!
Now watch this. How about this pipe image? Let me drag that over. And see, this time I actually drug it over and it has auto applied everything because I was down on the images. Hit Command or Control minus just so I can see how much I can stretch this. It looks like I'm actually need to do some real stretching on this one. So I'm gonna hold down the Shift key and just make it my own background. Nobody knows what this pipe wall looks like. I think I want this pipe coming over here. You want to stretch this out a little more because I enjoyed this part right here. I can pull that over, hit enter, Command or Control 0. And again, my texture for the background has already been applied. My texture for the guy, well, that is the guy. Here's the texture for the guy, has already been applied.
Yes!
So you see how you can very quickly make a lot of art, and I would say a lot of versions of your idea to figure out what you like the most. Now, what are some things I would consider at the end of this? Well, I think I see a little bit of a hard edge where my masking wasn't ideal. So I would go back and make sure I fine tune that edge, right? And I would start thinking about some of the blown out highlight areas. And maybe I would actually start treating this as its own image by going to the very top, punch the left side of the keyboard, which is Command Shift Option letter E. It's going to squish everything to the top layer. See how Option click on the eyeball? See, that's nothing changed because it's everything. All of these layers now equal this one layer. Command or Control J to duplicate my new original. And then I'd pop over to Camera Raw filter just again because I want to treat it as its own image. Now I'm in the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box. And remember, Adobe Camera Raw has the same exact processing algorithms as Lightroom. Like Adobe has said, they're basically the same engine under two different cars, just in their orientation. And I'm specifically referring to Lightroom's Develop module. Everything I need to adjust is here. So I would want to pull down the highlights, make sure I don't blow any of those out. And if I'm cautious, I can hold down the Alt or Option key and click up here. Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm blowing anything out at all, except this little spot right here. See those red splecks? That means that's blown out. So if I pull my highlight slider down, okay, that disappears. And remember, I never fixed this one edge, but this is for just demo. I would spend a lot more time on it, finishing it for a final print. Pull those highlights down just a touch more. Maybe this would be a good image to pump up the clarity, which is mid-tone contrast. And there's already a lot of texture in this image. Command or Control 0, dehaze it a touch, gives it a little more drama. Your choice. You can go about the shadows for more of that HDR illustrative look. You can come over to the effects panel and add a post-crop vignette. You know, we put a vignette on ready, but we can add, again, your choices are unlimited. Maybe you want to do a split toning. So you jack up the saturation. You want orange, something warm and sepia in the highlights, then pull back down the saturation to taste. Maybe here you want to have like blue shadows. So you pull that saturation down. So you get this really powerful image.
Yes!
Again, very, very quickly. And you can apply these color treatments to all your images in this series. Like, here's what I mean. If you go over to this side and you click on the presets, right? Go down to the bottom, which is add a new preset, black and white toning. It pre-checks all the stuff you want. And split toning is the one we did. And plus all these other adjustments. So I'll click OK. That toning has been applied here. Turn the eyeball on, turned it off, turn the eyeball on, so you can see what we've done. But here's the great part. I'll just turn these two off. Let me turn off this background. So I go back to this background, right? Now punch the keyboard again, Command Option Shift letter E, squishes everything to the top layer. I'm not gonna worry about duplicating it for these purposes. Go back to Adobe Camera Raw. Now, if I click on the very top one, it's just going to reapply all the same settings I just did, which is awesome. If I click this, it's going to automatically do everything that we just did, which is great for time's sake. So, holy moly, Batman. That is awesome. I know, right? Let's get back to the lecture. If you're doing these back to back, that's a nice option. So we'll use that as one of our options. I'll turn that eyeball off. Then we have another image. Yeah, here we go. I'll turn this one on down here, turn off this eyeball. Yeah, here's the first one we started with. I'll hit Command or Option Shift letter E to squish everything to the top. Now, notice what happened. It wouldn't work because I'm on a layer that has this eyeball turned off. So I'm going to go to the next below layer with an eyeball turned on. Command Option Shift letter E squishes it all to the top layer. Now, remember, the very top one, it just redoes whatever filter you just did with all the same settings. But I don't want that. So I want to go back all the way to the original dialog box because I want to make my own edits again. So I'm back in Camera Raw. And now instead of having to remember what I did, especially if I'm wanting to show these images in a series together on Instagram or in a gallery, and I want the toning to match, well, now I have a preset over here. And let me just find my preset. It'll be under User Presets. probably black and white toning, and it's already applied. And notice all my presets, I can hover over them and it will auto apply very much like you can in Lightroom. But here's my black and white toning. I'll click OK. And there we go. That's all you have to do. So I hope this first case study has been exciting for you.
Yes!
Hey, what are you still doing here? It's over.
Yes!
Actually, all kidding aside, I hope this video helped. And if it did, consider subscribing. I like subscribers.
That's awesome! What? You just took one in the jugular, man! Whoa! Yes! God! Oh my God, I did! Is this bad? Is this bad? You should pull that out. I should...
Hey, you stayed to the end. You know what that means? You're awesome. I'm talking about you. Now get out of here.